Hello everyone and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis. So there is a small announcement for you all that now we will be covering the Sunday newspaper as well on Monday. So every Monday we'll be discussing the newspaper for Sunday and Monday. So that is why we have the discussion for 18th and 19th October today from both the Indian Express as well as the Hindu. Today we have the first article which is from yesterday's The Hindu, which is titled as How Global Warming Might Affect Food Security. So as the name itself is suggesting, we'll be discussing about the impact of global warming that is being seen on the food security. And second, the hues in the Green Tribunal's resilient journey. This is from today's The Hindu, and it talks about the long and impressive journey that the Green Tribunal has covered since 18th October has marked 10 years of the inception of the National Green Tribunal. Thirdly, probing judicial impropriety and corruption. This is from today's The Hindu, and this Jagan versus Judges is from yesterday's The Hindu. So, as we know that very recently the Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister has written a letter to the Chief Justice of India alleging corruption or corrupt charges on one of the judges of the Supreme Court and also on various other institutions or judges of high courts. So we'll be discussing into that detail. And fourthly, we have News in Flash, wherein we'll be discussing the small and crisp news points which are more important for a prelims exam. So if you're also preparing for judicial services exam, so you can definitely have a look at our course that we have as a judiciary test prep course. So the link is there in the description box. You can check it out and download free study material as well. Let's see what is the multiple choice question for the day. 19th October is observed as Human Dignity Day in the memory of first, Nanaji Deshmukh, second, Pandurang Shastri Athawale, third, Karambir Bhaurao Patil, or fourth, Jyotirao Govindarao Phule. So if you know the answer, you can jot it down in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question for the day. Discuss the mandate of the National Green Tribunal. What are the challenges and way ahead of for efficient functioning of the NGT? Examine. So the answer must be written within a word limit of 250 to 300 words. With this, let's start with our first discussion for the day, which talks about global warming and food security. Now, as we know that amongst various other things that we are witnessing, global warming is one of the most alarming issues that we are currently trying to deal with. Now, since the Industrial Revolution that actually started in the 1870s, the global temperature has risen by 2 degrees Celsius. So though if we just consider it to be just 2 degrees Celsius, it seems very less, but it is the entire global increase. So whenever there has to be a study of a huge area or a huge, any huge study has to be there, even marginal differences actually mean a lot. So in that regard, 2 degrees Celsius has been the increased temperature to which we are referring to as the global warming. The carbon dioxide levels increased from 280 parts per million to 440 parts per million. Basically, by parts per million, just like we have, it is like a unit which is used for measuring the pollutants or any kind of constituents in the air. Just like we have various other pollutants, like we have sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, etc., and even other methane and other gases in our air which cause the pollution, they're also calculated into parts per million, and in short they're known as the ppm. So earlier the level of carbon dioxide in the air was 280 ppm, which is now increased to 440 ppm and has caused ocean acidification. Now this concept of ocean acidification is very important, be it for our mains or our prelims as well, as to what do we actually mean by ocean acidification. Simply, these greenhouse gases, and specifically if we talk about primarily the carbon dioxide, it makes this the water, specifically the surface and the uppermost level of the water in the oceans, to acidify. As in, you can see this entire process over here, that in the late 1800s there was reduced acidity, there was lower concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide, and that is why there was low absorption of CO2 by the ocean water. But with the increasing level of carbon dioxide, this absorption, obviously, because we know that these are in the forms of gases, and everything, be it the liquid or something, they absorb the gases, and so is the case with the ocean water as well. Now, this increased quantity of carbon dioxide in the atmospheric air has actually increased the absorption of CO2 in the ocean water as well. And once this CO2 gets dissolved into ocean water, it forms or takes forms of various different kinds of compounds of carbon. Now, be it like the carbonic acid or the free hydrogen ions, bicarbonate, as well as carbonate ions. Now, amongst these, the most dangerous is considered to be carbonic acid, which actually results in the acidification of the water of the ocean. Now, one thing that we need to understand is to why should we really be concerned with the acidification of ocean water? As we know that a lot of marine species actually live in this ocean water. So this acidification actually causes to erode the shells of the corals, mollusks, and other marine calcifiers, which actually have these shells kind of thing on their body to save themselves from other exigencies. But this acidified water tends to erode, or it just friction appears on these shells, and these actually tend to shorten the life period of these corals, which is a very big thing to be concerned about. Then also, due to the global warming, glaciers in Garhwal, Uttarakhand may virtually disappear by 2035, just 15 years after today's date. So this is really a huge concern, because these glaciers are a very important resource for various rivers, transient as well as the perennial, as in short-term and as well full-time rivers in Uttarakhand as well as nearby areas. And that is why it is very important to have all of these glaciers intact in the Garhwal region. So the impact of global warming should be kept in mind, since we are dealing with this problem in a very detail these days. So it might be a very potential question in our exam. Next, we need to understand and analyze as to how the global warming has impacted or affected the food security. Now, as we know that increased levels of these gases or unwanted increase in any of the constituents definitely has an impact on almost everything or every area of our world. Similarly is the case with the food security as well. The greenhouse gases warm the temperature, and it actually helps photosynthesis. So to a particular extent, we might really celebrate having the global warming, because the increased greenhouse gases, basically the function is like carbon has the tendency of absorbing more heat. Imagine if in our atmosphere we will have more of this carbon dioxide gas, or all these or these greenhouse gases, these will tend to hold back more of the sun's heat or warmth or light. In this scenario, what happens is that the photosynthesis, or the rate of the photosynthesis, the procedure with which the plants manufacture their food, this tends to increase in the initial levels. But then it restricts the plant's ability to absorb nitrogen, which actually restricts the growth. So it is not only the process of absorbing heat or sunlight that helps in the manufacture of food in the plants, but also it is important to absorb and fix nitrogen into their body in order to grow well. Obviously, if the plant is not growing well, it will not be able to bear fruits or vegetables or whatever products we are looking for. So in the initial stages, greenhouse gases actually helps in the process of, or catalyzing the process of photosynthesis. But in the long run, ultimately, it restricts the plant's ability to absorb nitrogen, that ultimately restricts the growth of the plant, and thus food security is challenged. Then it affects the crop productivity, like in India and neighboring countries in Saharan and Sub-Saharan, as well as the parts of South America, are hugely impacted by this process of global warming. So there was a related study wherein an experiment was done on C4 plants. Now, if you would get more into detail of C4 and C3 plants, you just need to understand that there are plants, like all the plants, they emit out oxygen. So that is why they act as the the filters, or the in a way the suppliers of oxygen on the earth. But now there are different procedures with which the plants take up this function of emitting out the oxygen. Thus, there are some kinds of plants and trees that actually not only emit the oxygen during the night time, but also for 24 hours a day. Just like we know that the peepal tree, which is very well venerated and worshipped in our own culture, so we know it is one of the reasons was that because it is considered to be very holy, as it serves the humankind as well as this entire environment, because it is also a C4 plant, in a way a C4 tree. It emits out or exhales oxygen all throughout the day. So there are these two different categories of plants. So an experiment was done on the C4 plants such as grass. So there is a Bermuda grass. It was taken into observation that it has actually improved heat tolerance and suppressed heat induced damages as well. And that is why it is the need of the hour that we have such plant species and such food grains or food crops that can actually endure higher in a way pollution as well as higher or increased temperatures as well. Then also some experiments were also carried on the C3 plants, which are the more normally found plants like the chickpeas, gram and chanas. So it was done by the Hyderabad Center of the IC RESAT. You can also go for the full form of it. So the observations which came up were that there was an increase in the root and shoot length. So this part of the plant which we see above the ground is known as the shoot, and this obviously all of us know is the root. So it said that when these plant species were put up for the increased temperatures, so they actually witnessed increase in the root as well as the shoot lengths. There was also an increase in number of nodules in the plants. These are the nodes or the nodules you can call them. And also there was a decrease in the chlorophyll synthesis. This is something that actually is something that would alarm us, because chlorophyll is very important for the procedure of photosynthesis. And if there would be decrease in the chlorophyll synthesis, then definitely there will be decrease in the food production as well. And this is how global warming would actually or is actually impacting the food security in various countries. So this was all for this article. We hope it was clear enough to you. Now let's move to the next article, which talks about the National Green Tribunal. So 18th October 2020 marked 10th anniversary of the National Green Tribunal. Now, as we know, whenever there is any question about the environment or environmental pollution, or there is any kind of violation of the environmental rules, it is the National Green Tribunal that comes to the rescue. So let's understand that how has been the journey, or what all National Green Tribunal has gone through in these many years of its evolution. So it was established under the National Green Tribunal Act 2010. So this is very important to understand. This can be a very potential prelims question also, as to the NGT was established under which of the following acts. So they would give some acts like Environmental Protection Act 1986 and so on and so forth. But the correct one is National Green Tribunal Act 2010. So the purpose for which the NGT was established was effective and expeditious disposal of cases relating to environmental protection and conservation of forests. Specialized body, so it is basically a specialized body to handle environmental dispute. All of us know about it, and it is not actually bound by the CPC 1908. So because it has its own procedure and it is a specialized body to specifically deal with matters concerning to the environmental protection and conservation. Then the place of sitting, as in the main headquarters of this National Green Tribunal, was the place of sitting, New Delhi, and then also Bhopal, Pune, Kolkata and Chennai. Now here is a fun fact for you all. Earlier, in the initial days, it was proposed that the principal office of the NGT be there in Bhopal, giving a tribute to all those victims of the Bhopal gas tragedy, which actually occurred in the 1980s. But then it was considered that keeping in mind all the convenience and stuff, so it was actually moved to New Delhi. It was actually planned for finally to be in New Delhi, but still we have an important branch of the NGT in Bhopal, Pune, Kolkata and Chennai as well. Now let's understand about as a small short story about the evolution of the NGT. So first, it was known to be as the Forest Bench. So earlier the name was not really the National Green Tribunal, it was called as the Forest Bench, and the Supreme Court designated a special bench to handle such issues. So earlier it was known to be like this. Then in 1986, through the case of MC Mehta versus Union of India and others, the then Chief Justice of India suggested setting up of environmental courts on a regional basis, and it was again reiterated in the AP Pollution Control Board versus Professor M.B. Naidu. So more emphasis was laid on to having a proper formal setting for discussing the environmental issues. And then there was establishment of the National Environmental Tribunal in 1995, in which award limited amounts of compensation that were environmental damages to life and property were granted. And National Environmental Appellate Authority was also there in 1997, which was the forum for challenges to environmental clearances. So these two actually lacked jurisdiction, authority, impact and autonomy. And even despite having these bodies, the issues that were coming or arising in the environmental area were not being dealt very efficiently due to the lack of jurisdiction, authority, impact and autonomy of these bodies. But then finally in 2010, through the Environmental Protection, this act that we have discussed, the National Green Tribunal Act 2010. So this tribunal, National Green Tribunal, was set up, and today we are celebrating 10 years of its completion. Now let's discuss what have been the achievements or the major achievements of the National Green Tribunal. Firstly, it created a new breed of legal practitioners. Now, by this we mean that there are a lot of activists and even the lawyers who specifically deal into this law and are more, sensitive, or in a way, they're more active in this regard. So, National Green Tribunal actually bred this new league of legal practitioners. Second, protected vast acres of forest land. Now, here I'll give you a very good example, one of the most latest examples. As you can see, these people, they're like all protesting and having the banners of Save RA. So RA is a very dense and very rich forest in like it is there in this Mumbai city of Maharashtra. So it was very recently it had to be cut down for some construction, some metro construction. So it was all proposed to be that this entire forest area would be cleared up. But the common residents of that area or living by or nearby, they actually came up on the streets and protested against this project. And it was the National Green Tribunal in finality that said that RA forest would not be cut down. And not only this, RA forest has also been declared as a reserve forest, and probably it is the only and the first case in this entire in the history of environmental protection that a forest that lies in the center of a metropolitan city has been declared as a reserve forest. So we should definitely owe it to the National Green Tribunal for giving us this gift. So next, halted polluting construction activities in metros and small cities, penalized errant officials, protected rights of tribal communities, and ensured enforcement of the polluter pays principle. Now, we had this principle of polluter pays, but in the real sense or in the practical scenario, it was never being implemented before the National Green Tribunal. And by this concept, as you can see earlier, like if there is an electricity plant, this firm and then the household. So the household used to pay to the firm used to pay to this complete whole electricity plant. Electricity plant used to send direct the electricity to firm, and then firm used to distribute it to different households. If meanwhile this, you can see, the pollution was going on or any violation was going on, none of them were actually held liable to pay for their wrongs. But after the polluter pays system, which has been very efficiently implemented by the NGT, this entire process goes on. But for the pollution that is being caused, a fine or in a way a complete tax or this payment of this fees is done to the government, which then again the government uses in the renovation purposes for the environment restoration. So this is the complete system of polluter pays principle. And let's see that what is the future that we can see for the NGT ahead. Focus less on governance issues and should focus more on education. It should expand the benches, fill the vacancies, obviously, for a more effective functioning, and it should remain a proactive inconvenience when needed. Now, by inconvenience, just like in this example, when this electricity plant has to pay to the government for causing pollution, obviously it is causing the inconvenience to this electricity plant. But this is the inconvenience that we need to keep a balance between the economy as well as the ecology. With this, let's discuss the next and final article for the day, which talks about probing judicial impropriety and corruption. In very brief, we'll just discuss as to what was the story. So, Andhra Pradesh CM Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy has written a letter to the Chief Justice of India, Justice Sharad A. Bobde, complaining about two things. Firstly, so one of the Supreme Court judges, Justice N.V. Ramanna, alleging influencing posting of cases in the state high court, and second, hostility of some high court judges against his government. So in a way, he has claimed that the Supreme Court judge Justice N.V. Ramanna has actually used in a negative manner or in an undesired manner his position and power to influence the postings of the cases in the state high court, and also the some judges of his own high court that he says that are turning very hostile and are actually targeting the functioning of his government. So here it actually has given that how are the allegations. Now, what for us it is very important to understand that if, like in this case, allegations are raised upon any judge, be it of the High Court or the Supreme Court, how or in what manner the entire proceeding takes place, or in what manner these cases are dealt with. So this is very important. So basically we have this procedure of having in-house procedure. How are allegations of misconduct against judges dealt with? If in case you haven't read yesterday's article from the Hindu, which is titled as Jagan versus Judges, you should definitely give it a read because it gives a very exhaustive and very clear idea about this entire procedure of the in-house proceeding. So basically it is followed since 1997, since a document called as Restatement of Values of Judicial Life by the then Chief Justice of India, J.S. Verma, was given for inquiry into such charges. So basically we all need to understand for now is that it is running since the time of 1997. But the complaints to be kept confidential. So earlier this was conception, and even today it is followed to many a times. But thanks to the transparency, at least some level of transparency that we have today. But earlier the complaints were actually more or less kept confidential, and also it was in the case of C. Ravichandran Iyer versus Justice A.M. Bhattacharjee in 1995. Now let's understand that how does this in-house procedure works. Firstly, the CGI decides if it is frivolous or does not involve any serious misconduct or impropriety. Now, first thing, obviously, because this is a charge not against any pickpocketer or some random thief. This is something, a charge against a very reputable person, and furthermore, his reputation adds to the reputation of the judiciary in totality. So obviously, it needs to be seen as to if the charges are frivolous or just they have been without any reason they have been raised, and or if actually there is some serious misconduct or impropriety attached to it. So if in case the CGI is confirmed that this is a serious charge, so the CGI will get to the judge's response. So he actually will get the judge's response and matter will be closed if he is satisfied with the response. So ultimately it will be the CGI and the response of the judge that will be taken care of. But if there has to be a deeper probe necessary, so if the CGI is not satisfied with the response that he received from that particular judge against whom the allegations were made, so he will take a deeper probe or a deeper inspection into this complete inquiry, and he will bring, or it will be necessary for both the parties and the CGI's comments are recorded. Now here both the parties are obviously one party that is raising the allegations, just like in our example, this Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, and the other party would be Supreme Court Judge Justice N.V. Ramanna, and also the hostile judges, some hostile, allegedly hostile turned judges of a High Court. And then the comments from both the parties will be taken and recorded by the CGI. Then, if necessary, a 3-member committee is formed. So, if the CGI believes that a further probe or complete inspection into this inquiry is needed, so a 3-member committee will be formed for fact-checking and not formal judicial inquiry. Now, please keep in mind that since the matter is already very sensitive in nature, so this 3-member committee is formed for the fact-checking process and not for a complete judicial inquiry. So it is not something that they will be taken into custody or something like that, like a normal police inquiry. Rather, it is more of concerned with finding the facts of this case and bringing it to the merit of the court. Then after completion of the probe, if committee finds substance, it can give 2 recommendations. Firstly, misconduct is serious enough to require removal from the office, or secondly, it is not serious enough to warrant removal. So obviously there can be these 2 contentions that can come out from the recommendations. Now, if in case there is this, it is considered that the misconduct is serious and it requires the removal from the office, so the concerned judge will be asked to resign or seek voluntary retirement. So either he can just resign or he can seek for voluntary retirement. And if he's unwilling to quit, then the Chief Justice of the High Court would be asked to withdraw judicial work from him. So if he is not willing to really quit the judge or quit the as in the court, so actually the Chief Justice of that particular High Court would be required to withdraw all judicial works that were earlier assigned to him. So he may be removed through impeachment as well. So as we know, there is an altogether different process for impeachment of the judges, and there are 2 conditions that need to be taken care of before the Member of Parliament sign for the impeachment of that particular judge. Firstly, solid documentary evidence should be available, and secondly, it should have become a public scandal as well, because many a times it has been seen that MPs are very reluctant in signing the impeachment of a particular judge, even if they have in hand solid documentary evidence, but it has not become a public scandal. But obviously, this second condition which is required is not possible if complaints are made confidential. right? So it is really important that transparency is followed, and this entire thing should be brought into the public domain as well. And only the retired judges of high court credibility. Now here the author has suggested that only now, see, because now so as we saw that a three member committee is formed for the entire fact finding and all this process. So it is really difficult to believe that judges who are junior to that particular judge on whom these allegations have been put up, that they would be able to work properly in this direction. And that is why only the retired judges of the high credibility should be the ones who can actually conduct a robust inquiry into the complaint. And as you know, it has been given, it has been actually stated by Prashant Bhushan, even he's the writer over here in this case. So this can be the one resort that we can take. Let's see, what do we have for news and flash today? First, Jacinda Ardern wins re-election in New Zealand. Now, as we know that New Zealand has been one of those countries that has dealt with this problem of COVID-19 in the most efficient manner. So she has been re-elected over there. So biggest election victory for the Labour Party in half a century by winning 64 out of 120 seats in these country's unicameral parliament. So it is the highest seat by a party since New Zealand adopted proportional voting system in 1996. Second, Aligarh Muslim University conferred the Sir Syed Excellence National Award. So AMU has received the award in the international category, whereas Anjuman-e-Islam, that is Mumbai-based educational conglomerate, was awarded the national category. Sir Syed's vision of a nation was one of the earliest expressions of an idea of India, which includes all inhabitants without discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, or race. As we know that Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was the one who actually inaugurated the Aligarh Muslim University and had a very important role in laying down the establishment of various educational institutions back then in 1920s. Third, amendment in Jammu and Kashmir Panchayati Raj Act. So to provide for setting up of district development councils in each district, and each district shall have 14 constituencies after delimitation. This basically marks the implementation of the entire 73rd Amendment Act in the Union Territory. Now, as we know that except for Jammu and Kashmir, it was applicable in all the other areas. But now, since it is also very much a part of like direct control of the central government, as it is a union territory now, so now the 73rd Amendment Act of Panchayati Raj is applicable in J&K as well. Fourth, Human Dignity Day today. 19th October is observed by the followers of Swadhyay movement in memory of the spiritual leader and social reformer Pandurang Shastri Athawale, who was popularly known as Dadaji. So Dadaji was awarded the Raman Magsaysay Award for Community Leadership in 1996, Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion in 1997, and Padma Vibhushan Dignity Day today, Yusen, in 1999. Fifth, naval version of BrahMos test fired successfully. Basically, BrahMos is also a missile. So it is a supersonic cruise missile successfully tested from an indigenously built stealth destroyer INS Chennai of the Indian Navy. It can reach a speed of 2.8 times than that of sound and hit a target at the range of 450 kilometers. So this is a huge accomplishment in the Indian security. So this was all for today. We hope it was a good session for you. Stay tuned with LawSikho for such more sessions to come. Thank you so much.